Hello and welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast, hosted by Daryl Dittmer, where we talk about the fight or fights that so many of us engage in this lifetime, as well as ways to potentially relieve ourselves of those fights. Let's get started. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Joining me today is Brian Joyce, a sober guy of almost 2.5 years, an advocate of emotional sobriety, emotional regulation, and a spiritual way of life, and a believer in psychedelic-assisted mental health therapy. Welcome, Brian. So great to have you.
Thank you, Daryl. It's great to be here and join you today.
It is. We talked a little bit before I hit record, and I know we're going to have a great conversation because I feel like we're just going to kick things back and forth, which is wonderful. So I wanted to start out, both of us are in recovery. We're sober guys, and without necessarily, jumping into your story, which I will do soon. How's the last 2.5 years of sobriety been, or almost 2.5 years?
Well, it's been life-changing. I went from a point of, just constantly pretending to be somebody else, to coming to understand that, I'm enough. And all anybody has ever wanted from me in my life is for me to just be me. And that makes the load a lot lighter, for sure. So the last 2.5 years, everything in my life has changed in the last 2.5 years. Where I live, who I'm married to, where I work, with employment, and my circle of friends. Everything has changed. And that's just a result of, doing the work, which isn't, it can be intimidating. People are like, oh, I got to do the work, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I had the monster built up really big in my head, and it was small, So the last 2.5 years have been great.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it, and that's great. It takes what it takes, right, to get us to the point where we are not only want to change, because I think, to a large extent, many people want to change, but what are we willing to do to allow ourselves to change and to help that change along? And when you say, in the very beginning there, I wasn't good enough, and I just felt like I was not enough, and that's just that was so pervasive for me for such a long time, and I got sober at a fairly young age, and so I was trying to figure out this whole life thing in addition to figuring out the whole sobriety thing. So when they threw those steps in front of me, and I got a sponsor who was wonderful, but it was a lot to choke down. I mean, it's a lot of things that I had never been exposed to before, right? So and I'm assuming you found that like the simple part of it, where, I'm enough how I am, and I don't have anybody to impress. I mean, what a wonderful realization to come to.
Yeah. I was a big people pleaser, and someone posed the question to me the other day. It's like, so if you could be honest but you had to be rude, would you take that route? Or if you could be dishonest but be polite, would you take that route? And it's like, well, you got to take the honest route. But if I'm people pleasing, I'm going to tell people what they want to hear, because I want them to like me, because I don't think if I just present myself, it's going to be enough. So yeah, very, very powerful, and so simple, such a simple concept. I'm enough. But like a lot of things in recovery and life, it's simple, but it's not easy. Daily persistent effort is really the key for me.
100% agree. And that's been my entire journey. And, there's for me, it's been okay, I got to get the garbage out of my life sort of thing, which, the drugs and the alcohol as sobriety commenced. But then it becomes life. I mean, and that's what it's been for a long time now. It's just life. And I need to continually get better at life, in my opinion, if I want to continue to reap the benefits of being sober, and then ultimately remain sober, right? Because if I don't have sobriety, I don't have life. And if I don't have sobriety, I can't learn, and I can't grow, and I can't move, and I can't try new stuff, and I can't take risks. Well, at least not those kind of risks, not the risks that are going to propel me in the right direction. I can do a lot of stupid stuff, but those aren't the risks that I want to take. So yeah, I'm completely with you on your your take, and I'm feeling the gratitude that you have, which is such a crucial component, right, of moving our lives forward.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, because that's been a big part of my journey. Another big thing is, you talk about the gratitude, just having a little bit of gratitude for whatever is present right now. I mean, I'm looking around and I'm grateful for the house and the weather and, the dogs and all that. It helps keep me in the present, because no amount of regret's going to change the past. No amount of anxiety is going to change the future, because there's no control. But even a little bit of gratitude in the present can make a big difference. And so it's the here and now, and that ties into the emotional regulation thing that we'll get into later. But yeah.
No, that's great. Gratitude is a absolute foundation, and it doesn't, for me, gratitude didn't come naturally. I wasn't just automatically grateful for waking up in the morning and for a gift of life, the gift of just being alive, which is a really cool thing. The people that I'm surrounded with in my life, you had mentioned, that so many things in your life, or everything in your life, is different since you've gotten sober. And that was crucial for me. They said when I was coming in, change the game, you got to change the players. And that was 100% true for me, and worked really well for me. But the transition part of it isn't easy. The transition part is, well, here's this whole world I'm familiar with, and then here's this whole creepy world that they're telling me to do stuff that I don't necessarily want to do. And it's scary. But that's the part where, there's some blind faith that I think, we just have to say, hey, I want this enough to do the hard stuff. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, Brian, if you would. I just find everybody's journey so fascinating, and if you wouldn't mind, that'd be great.
So my journey is a little bit circuitous. So before I got into recovery, I was, like a lot of people, I assume, I was just dominated by negative thinking patterns. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why I was always angry, why I was sad. Anything that made me happy was temporary. That's where the drugs and the alcohol came in. But it had gotten so bad in 2020, the negative thinking patterns, that I went and sought out help. And I had the ability to do some psychedelic assisted mental health therapy on the negative thinking patterns. And, what it did was it got rid of the negative thinking patterns, and that pretty much stayed. But it got me into spirituality. I didn't know what spirituality was. I thought it was synonymous with religion, right? But my intuition was telling me, is like, okay, so the effects of this therapy is not just automatic. So I've got to do something to integrate this into my life. And so I got into spirituality, and I was sober for 4 months. I hadn't been able to stay sober for 4 days before this. And I don't know what would have happened if I would have continued down that path, but then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I dropped the spirituality and started reading everything I could about COVID. And so it wasn't long. I was back into my thinking patterns, and then I started picking up alcohol again. And then I had my come to Jesus moment in December of 2021. It was at my wife's holiday party. I didn't know if she was going to let me drink. This is my ex. And so I pre-partied, and then once we got to the place, she's like, "Yeah, you could have a couple drinks," and that turned into a lot. Next thing I know, I wake up in my car. The EMT, they're popping out the windshield, and I look up at the guy and I ask him, and I said, "Did I hurt anybody?" And he goes, "No, you hit the curb and you flipped over." And I said, "Okay, great." And then I was back out. Woke up in the ER. I had busted up my shoulder. I had burned every bridge. I had to take a cab home from the ER. And so, I was home isolated for a couple of months with a busted up shoulder, and I didn't have anybody because I'd burned everything. And I had spent the last 2 decades convincing myself I didn't care if I lived or died. But I asked a sincere question in my kitchen because I was screwed, Daryl. Like, do you want to live? And the answer I got immediately, and I found out later, is from myself. It's like, yes, I do. And it's like, well, then what are you going to do? And so I got into AA, and I had no idea what to expect. It was really intimidating. And then I discovered it was a spiritual program. And because of the psychedelic assisted mental health therapy, those first 3 steps, powerless over alcohol, life's unmanageable, believe in a power greater than myself, whatever it is. And then being willing to turn my life and will over. I mean, I'm like, I can do that, because I've done that before because of the psychedelic assisted mental health therapy. And I'm like, okay, great. But then the 4th step, I did my 4th step with my sponsor, and I felt lighter because, my deal is, I chose to party rather than to be a dad and a husband. And I thought, who does that? I've got to be the worst person walking on the planet, because nobody does that. Well, it turns out a lot of people do that. I'm not unique in any way. That was a big thing for me too. It's like, okay, so I'm just a normal drunk, garden variety. Nothing special about me. But what I was able to do was put the nail in that 4th step. And I was able to realize that 27-year-old Brian that I had held in prison because I thought he was the antagonist of my life was actually the hero, because he was doing the best that he could at the time. And if I look back on it, his job was just to survive. And he did that. And so I was able to pardon him, let him out of jail, love that guy. And it's kind of hard to explain. I mean, because I love my daughter, we're still estranged. I would do anything to have her back in my life, but I don't carry the excess guilt, and I don't carry the excess shame around that is, not serving me. And, the proof of that is, and a lot of people call, BS on this, but it is what it is. My daughter filed a petition for a name change. She's 30 years old now. She filed a petition for a name change to change her last name from my name to her stepdad's name. And the reason that she put on there was, I don't associate with my biological dad and my stepdad. That's who I consider my father. Well, when I read that, I braced myself. I thought for sure I was going to go back and feel like just the tiniest piece of crap or the biggest piece of crap, but the universe still revolving around me, right? But it never came. I mean, it made me sad, but it didn't linger. But it didn't make me feel like I was just a terrible, terrible person. And that is the benefit of the work. So I'm not being held hostage by that belief system and the thoughts that emanate from that, and then the emotions and the feelings that come from that. And so here we are. So when I got in and moving on from that 4-step, I came to realize, look, if I'm not going to drink or use again, I need to be happy. Because, I mean, if I'm not happy, that's dangerous for me. And I saw a lot of people with lots of sobriety in the rooms that weren't happy, didn't appear happy to me. So that's when I started focusing on the emotional sobriety. And that's when I came to realize is like, I am not what my feelings are. And my emotional state is not random. It is not. And that was a giant wake-up call for me. And that's where the emotional regulation idea, and it's not new. It's just, it's in the, they call it emotional intelligence, but to me, that's a little condescending, right? You mean I'm emotionally stupid? Maybe I am, but don't call me that. So that's why I went with emotional regulation. And
Yeah.
because, if people can learn, well, I learned, let's do it that way. I learned to be, if I can observe my thoughts, right? And just ask why. Why is the question? Why am I feeling like this? Well, and then observe my thoughts. Well, then I can get back to the belief system. And, that comes from whatever emotional trauma I had and reshaping that. And that's where the crux of everything is. It's just, changing the operating system that I'm operating in. I mean, it's software. Anything that's been acquired can be unacquired, in my view. So, I mean, I guess that's my story. And so here we are today talking to you.
Yeah, here we are. What did you say earlier before we hit record? Life is in session.
Yeah, it is.
Right? I mean, here we are. And so thank you for sharing that story, Brian. I do appreciate it. So many things just sort of pinged with me, but, I had been around the tables for a long, long time and many years. And as we continue to sort of hang out, and observe and integrate and do the work and all those kinds of things, I think we find ourselves, or I found myself, there's people who look at this as a program for me to have a better life. The 12 steps are to have a better life. That's what they are. And I do that by digging in the dirt, and I do that by getting my hands dirty, and I do that by, for figuring out, I needed to figure out what steps do I need to take in my life. And I'm not talking the 12 steps. I'm talking about what things do I need to do in my life so that I can get to a point where I wake up in the morning with a smile on my face, and that's it. Right? Like,
yeah.
That's it. And so there's a whole lot of gyrations, that happen over the course of many years of me, praying and not praying, meditating and not meditating, being grateful and not being grateful, et cetera, et cetera. There's just all those things that happen over the course of time. And I get a little bit better at it, and I get a little bit better at it. And, that was kind of my thing, is I at one point in my sobriety, because I chased money, I chased, the quote unquote success. I wanted to have a different life than I grew up having, from a financial perspective, that kind of thing. And I chased all those things. And then at some point it became really important for me I just want to wake up in the morning with a smile on my face. And I was able to get that, So I love the story. I love the work. I love the focus on it's an inside job. And so thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful. And the thing that I've began to understand, in my sobriety a long time ago, and it becomes important to, as time goes on, I want to hear people's stories because something that they say may resonate with me. And my life now is about how can I help others? How can I help other people, feel a life that they love? And, how can I contribute to that for other people? And that's kind of where I'm at these days. And everybody's got the story. Everybody's got a story that is unique in some way, that when they talk about that story, it may help someone else's story get a little bit better. And I think that is, that's the crucial part of it. That's why the whole AA thing works, and that's why Bill and Bob came together so long ago, right? To support each other. And anyway, it's a cool thing. So I guess a couple of questions that come to mind for me, and one is, what is or has been your greatest, I guess, ally in terms of your moving into a sober life and moving into a happier existence? Who or what?
I think at the beginning, the sobriety had less to do with me and more to be with who and what I surrounded myself with. It was really important for me to put myself in a position to succeed. I wasn't going to go to the bar with people. I can do that now. It's fun. And, another thing in sobriety is, drunk people are annoying, but I can't complain because I think I was at the top of that list. Now, a couple plus years in, I think, my biggest ally and my biggest adversary are the same person. And it just goes to, like I've had, my sponsor told me, Brian, there's only two people you need to learn how to love: yourself and your enemies. And I'm telling you, most of the time it's the same person. So, I believe right now in my journey that I am my limiting belief. It's me that stops me from getting stuff done. And whether that limiting belief is just throwing up my hands and saying, I can't do this, this is not going to happen. But the biggest lesson in recovery for me is that if I don't stop, it can get done. I can get it done. And it's, the results are amazing. And again, it's simple, but it's not easy, because just staying focused in the present, and understanding I don't have control over outcomes, and that usually the outcome is acceptable to me, but sometimes it's not. And if I get a bad outcome, that's where the mindfulness comes into play. Okay, well, this is temporary, and I'm a big believer in Taoist philosophy, and it's like, I've never been in control. I'm not in control now, and I'll never be in control. But the outcome, if it's an outcome I don't want, it's temporary. And in every misfortune, good fortune hides. And it can be unlocked if I have the patience to just let that happen. And so that is how I stopped fighting all of the nouns, right? All of the people, all of the places, all of the things. Nouns are my friend now. They're not the enemy anymore, because it's like, just, can you imagine trying to control places and things? It's like, good luck, So that, so my biggest ally, my biggest adversary, right now is myself. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. So cool. And I swear you've been reading my book, because there is a chapter in my book called The Nouns.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
about, there's only three things in this world that I can't control, and it's the nouns: people, places, and things, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just, it's funny because that's to me now, that's just kind of basic life stuff, but nobody teaches you that, right? Like nobody teaches you that when you're coming up. Nobody says, "Oh, by the way, you can't control people. You can't control places. You can't control things." Oh, well, shoot. I wish somebody would have said that. You
Right. That
know,
would have helped.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we all have to learn, right? We all have to, and that's the journey. We all have to
Yeah.
learn how to, we get our own lessons in regard to those things. But I think it's so crucial to, and I don't necessarily call it emotional regulation or emotional intelligence. I just call it having my what together,
Yeah.
because that's what it is. And you mentioned something for me that's really crucial, that I am not responsible for outcomes. I am not responsible for how it all plays out. I am responsible for the work. That's the only thing I'm responsible for. And when you talk about, emotional, um, intelligence and regulation and that sort of thing, they have those little sayings in the 12-step programs for a reason, like this too shall pass. And
Yeah.
and it takes a long time. It took me a long time to get my head around some of those little sayings, and, one day at a time. And little did I know that one day at a time I can just keep digging and digging and digging and digging. And once I dig that one out, it means being in the moment, being in the moment. And,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a day at a time. It's now. And I think that's, it's cool because you mentioned Taoism, and I was a huge advocate early on. My sponsor gave me a book by Emmett Fox called The Ten Commandments, which, they gave Emmett Fox material out early in the program, and Sermon on the Mount was probably the most prevalent one, but because Ten Commandments didn't come till later. But he gave me that book, and it expanded how I thought about my life, and how I thought about the world, and how I thought about, like, God and everything else. And it was the coolest thing. But when you mentioned Taoism, I because I've read so much stuff on Confucianism and Taoism and legalism and, just
Yeah.
Buddhism, everything. And it doesn't mean I have to believe it all, right? It just means take what you can use and leave the rest. And it's really cool to be able to draw from different philosophies, as opposed to, here's your box of stuff when you're young. Here's what you're allowed to believe, and then we unravel all that stuff, right, as time goes on.
Yeah.
And that's our charge. For me, that's my charge. And it sounds like that's your charge also.
Yeah. I mean, it's a way of life. And I mean, because the way, and we've talked a little bit on Twitter and maybe before the show about the counterintuitive stuff. Look, what I was doing before wasn't working, right? So there has to be a change. So maybe, that's why the stuff that works is counterintuitive to me. I don't know if it'd be counterintuitive to other people. But, they talk about the paradoxes in AA. You got to give it away to get it. Well, what about at the other end, at the beginning? I've got to give up control to get whatever control I can have over myself. And it's just the Taoism part for me. It started with, oh wow, this is a good explanation of the nature of existence, and I'm like, no, this is a blueprint for living, and I said it before, just being sober wasn't going to be enough for me. I needed to, be happy, or at least happy enough. And I think the big lesson I've learned is, it's like fill in the blank. Happiness is, well, it's now. Happiness is now. Yeah, if I'm waiting for happiness to happen, I don't think I'm going to find it. That's just what I've found. So make the most of the moment.
I 100% agree. I think, happiness is not a place.
Yeah.
And I used to call it, a result. Happiness is a result of the work that I do to lay the groundwork to allow me to be happy, because I'm not all bound up with all the other stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
But something you mentioned earlier, and I think is crucial for me, and it's probably more how I define it now, because to me, happiness is just fleeting. Happiness can come and go, and whatever. It can be based on circumstances. It can be based on this happened and I liked it, or this didn't happen and I didn't like it. All that sort of stuff. So I think it's easy to get caught up in, oh, I need to be happy. Well, what you had mentioned early on is kind of what I think about now, and as far as I don't think in terms of happy. I think in terms of contentment, and I think in terms of fulfillment, and that's how I would characterize happiness in my life. But it is the moment. It is in those moments when we're here now and we're grateful. And like you mentioned earlier, it's here and it's now and it's gratitude, and that's what, for me, what keeps the engine going. That's for me what puts that little chill down my spine, where I'm just so freaking grateful for all the stuff, right? And it's it's not the stuff. It's just it's life, and it's the simplicity of what's beautiful around me, that I in the past I would be probably guilty of trying to reach out to find stuff, and little did I know it's all right here. But that's what I
Yeah.
needed to learn. So
Yeah.
thank you for saying this is, I haven't been doing this for too long, the whole podcast thing. I've been a guest on a ton, but as far as starting my own, but you are the first person, sir, and thank you for saying it, who my greatest adversary and my greatest ally is me. And it's
Yeah.
it's just 100% true. So thank you for clarifying that, and for understanding that and sharing that, because I think it's really easy to point outside of ourselves, as opposed to, hey, it all starts and ends here. It all starts and ends here,
Yeah.
and that journey is a gigantic journey. So I guess my last question. I know we're coming up a little bit on not the end, but we're making our way there. So if you were going to offer advice to somebody embarking on a journey of, it doesn't necessarily have to be sober, it could be change, it could be a different way of life, it could be feeling better, it could be, a number of those things. What advice would you give people embarking upon the journey?
I would, I would say, find somebody who is talking about something that resonates with you. I mean, it doesn't have to be recovery. I mean, it could just be, like just general life coaching. I assume, because I don't think the journey is any different. AA gives me tools to interrupt my thinking process until I can go and deal with the cause. So the advice I would give to people is like, look, if you want change to happen, if you want life to improve, I got it backwards. If you want life to get better, then something's got to change. And change is uncomfortable, right? And it's not going to make a lot of sense. So be open-minded, be willing, take some suggestions and try stuff, find out what works, for you. The biggest lesson I've had is, like, I'm talking to people and they've gone one way and I've gone the other way, and one way is not right and the other one's not wrong. It's the journey. There's more than one path to the mountaintop. And I don't know if people are, so like I came in, I didn't believe in God, right? I was an agnostic. But through recovery, um, I got in here to get sober, and then accidentally, well, then it turned into spirituality, but then accidentally, it wasn't the plan. It turned into self-discovery and self-realization. And you can't walk anybody through that door because then it's not self-realization anymore, right? So you have to just fall into it. And so, I mean, it doesn't make me better. It doesn't make me more courageous than anybody. I just feel fortunate. And that is what led to me. It's like, oh my God, everything's in here. I don't need anything external to justify myself. It's just, it's all in here. And then the last thing I would say to people embarking on this journey is just believe in yourself. Because to me, it doesn't matter what I believe as long as I believe it. If I believe in myself, or if I believe in, that external God, or religion, it's just belief. It's belief in myself, and then I don't have to cover up my emotions with alcohol or drugs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. I when you say belief, it makes me think of faith, and it makes me think how important faith is in this life. And it doesn't. And I hear people talk about faith a lot, and what you said was, everything you said there could really help people, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And when I think about faith, I think not necessarily just in God or a higher power, or and I'm hearkening back to you talking about believing in yourself, but faith in life, faith that life is going to show me what I need to do. And then for me, I need to add my helping of doing the work. And because I truly believe, and I believe this every day, and I've seen it play out in my life for a long time, that life hands me what I need to, and it's not always pleasant. Sometimes it can be very unpleasant. But life hands me what I need to move forward, and it shows me the lessons. And if I don't get it the first time, it'll keep showing me.
Yeah.
And how the hell does that work? But it does. And I've seen it happen in my life 1,000 times. And I'm like, wait a minute. Something out there knows more than I do,
Mm-hmm.
which is a pretty cool thing. We talked before we hit record, right, about not knowing. Like
Yeah.
the greatest freedom is just not knowing.
Yeah.
And that's such a cool thing. So much in there you said resonated with me, and makes complete sense to me. And I look forward to our, continued interactions, whether it's Twitter or whatever. We just, we talk or stay in touch, because I've very much enjoyed everything you've had to share this morning, Brian. So I guess one last question, if that's okay, is how can our audience find you? How can we find, any of the work that you may want to do or not do, or how do we get
Right now you can find me on Twitter is at Hoysay Recovery, which is HOYSAY. And that's it for right now. I'm busy putting up some content. I don't know where it's going to lead, Daryl. Maybe someday soon I'll have you on my podcast.
Cool.
But just right now, just trying to get out in the recovery community on social media and kind of spread the word. Because I think I've got something that can help people. Because you talked about happiness was just, it comes and goes. Well, those primary emotions, they come quick and then they leave. But you talked about contentment and serenity and all those things. Those are the feelings that come from the happiness emotion, right? And it's just waking up with a smile on my face and getting to do stuff, not having to do stuff. Life can be as simple as I make it. Not necessarily easy all the time, but I really enjoyed the time. Hopefully you'll have me back on. If you ever need a spot to fill, give me a holler. I'd love to
Yeah,
come on again.
I will definitely do that, Brian. And it's been wonderful chatting. I've loved really everything that you've said. And there's, I talk to a lot of people, and I have talked to thousands of people in recovery over the years. And, there's always an interesting layer to people who, that I sort of resonate with, and I feel like we resonated, in terms of our discussion and how we
Yeah.
look at things, and that's a pretty cool thing. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing everything that you shared, and we'll definitely get you back on here as time goes
All
on.
right. All right. That sounds good. And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks so much, and we'll talk real soon.
All right. Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.